In a peaceful, unsuspecting Florida town, a preacher was living the life everyone around him admired. A family man, a father-to-be, a man whose reputation seemed built on unwavering faith and devotion. But beneath the surface, something was quietly unfolding, something that would turn this seemingly perfect life upside down. A betrayal, one that would stretch the boundaries of trust, and a dangerous secret that would tear a family apart. What would cause a respected leader of a community to risk everything for an affair with a convict in prison? And what happens when that affair leads to more than just a broken marriage? A disease like HIV, passed unknowingly to his pregnant wife, would change their lives forever. A quiet life shattered. A trust betrayed. A family forever changed. This is the story of one preacher's fall from grace, a story of choices with consequences that no one saw coming. In a small, tight-knit community in Florida, there was a preacher everyone looked up to. He wasn't just the spiritual leader of his congregation, he was a father, a husband, a man whose voice brought comfort and direction to those who needed it most. His life seemed like the embodiment of faith, steadfast, unwavering, perfect even. His wife, pregnant with their child, stood by his side, sharing in this picture of stability and devotion. But what no one knew was that beneath this exterior of respectability, a secret was festering, one that would soon come to light in the most devastating way. The preacher, a man who had sworn to lead his community with integrity, found himself caught up in an illicit affair. Not just any affair, but one with a convicted felon. A man behind bars, serving time in prison for crimes that had already altered the course of his life. It started with letters, correspondence that led to something far more dangerous, something that would break the preacher's vow to his family and his faith. Their secret meetings, and the connection they shared, went on unnoticed by his wife for months. But everything changed when the preacher unknowingly transmitted HIV to his pregnant wife. It was a sexually transmitted disease, one that threatened not only his wife's health but the safety of their unborn child. The situation spiraled out of control when his wife discovered the affair and the truth about what had been passed on to her. In an instant, the quiet, seemingly perfect life they had built together came crashing down. Trust, once unshakable, was shattered. A family torn apart by betrayal and the consequences of reckless choices. What led this preacher, a man trusted by his congregation, to make such a dangerous decision? Was it temptation, or something deeper? What would push him to risk everything, his family, his reputation, and even his future, for an affair with a felon behind bars? How did it all unravel, and what did it mean for the wife caught in the middle of it all? The man at the heart of this affair, the one who would shatter a life of faith and stability, was a convicted felon, incarcerated for crimes that had already cast a long shadow over his future. His name, once common in the prison system, would soon become the key to unlocking the preacher's darkest secret. This wasn't a crime of passion, it wasn't even something born of proximity. No, their affair began in a far less intimate way, one that would go unnoticed for some time. The felon, serving time for a violent offense, was no stranger to the harsh realities of life behind bars. Yet, in that constrained world, he found solace in an unlikely place, the letters that flowed between him and the preacher. It began as a religious correspondence, a simple exchange of ideas about faith, repentance, and redemption. On paper, it was innocent enough, two men, separated by walls, connecting through the shared language of spirituality. But as the weeks and months passed, something changed in their letters. Words began to carry more weight, sentences veered into territory neither man could have anticipated, and the lines between faith and temptation began to blur. The preacher, a man entrusted with guiding others, had found a source of attention, understanding, and perhaps even validation in the felon. The prison letters turned personal. With every message sent, something shifted inside the preacher. What had started as innocent curiosity slowly gave way to something more dangerous. The prisoner, with his own complex history and his own set of scars, saw in the preacher a man who perhaps longed for something he could not find in his own life. The relationship deepened. And before either man fully understood the gravity of what was happening, they were exchanging far more than just letters. What began as correspondence turned into a secret that neither of them would ever be able to undo. Their relationship crossed the line between thought and action. They made plans that would lead them to a rendezvous that would forever change the course of two lives, and ultimately the lives of those closest to them. But what could have driven the preacher, someone who had built a life of faith and integrity, a man who publicly preached about family values, to take such a risk? Was it a search for something more, something beyond the life he had been living? Could it have been a craving for a connection that, in his heart, he felt was missing? Or perhaps it was desperation, something buried deep within him that no one could see. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about a man so entrenched in his own secret identity that he couldn't recognize what he was throwing away. Psychologically, the preacher's choices speak to the complexity of human desire and fear. For a man who had built his identity around trust, respect, and faith, what would possess him to betray everything? Was it a longing for something different, something forbidden, or did he feel cornered in a life that was suffocating him? Could it have been a series of impulsive decisions, one leading to the next, until the lies became too heavy to carry? And then came the moment that would expose everything, the discovery. The preacher's wife, pregnant with their child, had long suspected that something was off. He had been distant, secretive. There were small, almost imperceptible signs that something wasn't right: late nights, erratic behavior, and his increasing withdrawal from the family he had once been so committed to. But it was the HIV disease that finally confirmed her worst fears. When the wife learned the truth, that the preacher had contracted and unknowingly passed on a sexually transmitted disease like HIV, it wasn't just the disease that shattered her. It was the realization that everything she had believed about her marriage, about their life together, was a lie. She confronted him, and in that moment, the preacher's entire world came crashing down. What had once seemed like a quiet, perfect family life was now in ruins, the trust between them irrevocably broken. The emotional toll on the wife was immediate and overwhelming. Pregnant and vulnerable, she faced the very real danger of the disease affecting not just her, but the unborn child she carried. The pain was both physical and psychological, knowing that the man who should have protected her had instead betrayed her in the most unforgivable way. But the question remained: what did the preacher's community think when the truth came to light? This man, who had been their guide, their leader, was now exposed for the deception that had been unfolding behind their backs. The fallout wasn't just personal, it was public. A man who had held the moral high ground now found himself among the most scandalous figures in town. How could a man like him, who had stood at the pulpit and offered counsel to others, have allowed himself to fall so far? And were there more secrets? The affair itself was explosive, but what else had been hidden beneath the surface? What other lies had been told, what other deceit had been buried deep within the preacher's life? The community was left with one question: was this all there was to the story? Or was there something more? Had the preacher truly confessed everything, or was there something lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to come out? What will happen next? Did the preacher ever come clean? Was he hiding more than just this affair? Did his own guilt drive him to confess, or did the public exposure force his hand? Only time would reveal the true extent of the preacher's betrayal. By now, the weight of the preacher's actions has sunk in. The community, the family, the marriage, everything was torn apart because of one reckless decision. But the real question remains: why did he choose to betray the trust of his wife, his congregation, and everyone who believed in him? Was it simple temptation, a moment of weakness that led to a choice he couldn't take back? Or was there something deeper driving him, something about his own life, his own desires, that caused him to risk it all? What was it that pushed a man of faith to fall so far? Could it have been an escape from a life he felt trapped in, a search for something that felt real, even if it meant sacrificing everything? Now, imagine yourself in the wife's position. What would you do if you found out your husband, the man you trusted above all else, had betrayed you in the worst possible way? Your life, your family's future, is suddenly at risk, all because of one man's decisions. The weight of that discovery, it would shake anyone to their core. Would you confront him? Would you walk away, or try to salvage what's left? What choice would you make if you were in her shoes? Think about it. Could you ever forgive him? The preacher's affair wasn't just a betrayal between two people, it was a betrayal that would ripple through every aspect of his life. From his marriage, to his community, to his reputation, every single piece of his carefully crafted life was on the verge of collapse. As we move further into the story, the weight of this revelation begins to set in. Every decision, every interaction, has now taken on a different meaning. What was once a man of honor is now a man on the brink of losing everything. And while the affair itself was devastating, the real question is, how would this break not just his family, but an entire community that had placed its trust in him? But the story doesn't end here. Just when you think you know the full scope of the damage, the preacher makes a decision that no one saw coming. It's one thing to betray a spouse, it's another to betray an entire congregation, to face the consequences of your actions and, perhaps, seek a way out that no one ever expected. Was this the last chapter of his fall, or was there more to this story? What happens when the preacher finally faces the reality of his actions, and when the community he had once guided must decide how they will respond? At this point, we begin to peel back the layers. The affair was just the beginning, the spark that ignited the fire, but what came after, the reactions, the consequences, the emotional toll, would reveal a much deeper complexity. You see, as his wife faced the pain of betrayal and HIV disease that threatened her health, the preacher was forced to reckon with his own shame and the destruction he had brought upon everyone in his life. The community, the congregation, how did they respond when the affair was exposed? How does an entire town reconcile the image of a man they once trusted? Their spiritual leader, a man who had counseled them in their times of need, was now the center of an explosive scandal. The fallout wasn't just private, it was public, unfolding in front of everyone who had once looked up to him. What did they think when they found out? Did they feel deceived, abandoned, or even betrayed by someone they had seen as a pillar of moral strength? And just when you thought this story couldn't get any more shocking, the preacher's next move left everyone stunned. What would he do in the face of this destruction? Would he fight for redemption? Would he try to make amends? Or would he walk away from everything he'd known? The next chapter in this shocking tale has yet to be revealed, and it's one that will make you question everything you thought you knew about this preacher, and what happens when someone who had it all chooses to risk everything. At the heart of this story is a woman, a wife, who stood by her husband through thick and thin. She trusted him with her heart, her future, and the life they had built together. But when the truth came crashing down, when the discovery of his affair and the disease he unknowingly transmitted to her were revealed, everything she knew, everything she had believed in, was shattered. What makes this betrayal even more painful is the fact that she was pregnant. Imagine, for a moment, the weight of that realization: you are carrying a child, your life already full of uncertainty, and now you have to face the reality that your partner's actions have put not just your health, but your child's life in jeopardy. Pregnancy is a time that should be filled with joy, hope, and anticipation, but instead, she was forced into a world of fear and confusion. The emotional turmoil of discovering the affair, coupled with the fear for her own health and the safety of her unborn child, added layers of trauma no one should have to endure. The pain she felt wasn't just physical. The emotional devastation she faced was unfathomable. How do you process the realization that the person who was supposed to protect you, your partner, the father of your child, has betrayed you in the most intimate, most life-altering way possible? How do you move forward when trust, the very foundation of your relationship, has been destroyed? For this woman, the battle was not just with the HIV disease, it was with the overwhelming sense of loss, the loss of a dream of a family, the loss of the man she had believed in, and the loss of her peace of mind. And then there is the psychological toll. What does it feel like to learn, with absolute certainty, that the person you trusted above all else had been living a lie for so long? There is a certain kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than any other, the kind that challenges your very sense of reality. This wasn't just about infidelity, this was about deception that threatened not only her health but also the future she had imagined with her husband. Her entire sense of identity was now in question. The emotional scars would be long-lasting. Trust is something that, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. For a woman in her position, every moment after the discovery would be clouded with doubt, grief, and fear. But what of the preacher himself? What does this say about him as a man, a leader, and a father? The preacher had built his entire life on a foundation of trust and faith. He had been a guide for others, someone who was supposed to lead by example. Yet, behind the facade, he harbored secrets that he never intended to share. So, what kind of person does this make him? How could someone who claimed to be a moral leader, who had the trust of so many, commit such a devastating act of betrayal? Psychologically, this behavior speaks to something deeper within the preacher's psyche. Was it a desire for control? A need for affirmation, something that could not be found within the confines of his public life? Was it the pressure of maintaining a perfect image that drove him to seek solace in the arms of another, or was this something more deeply ingrained in his character? His actions suggest a complex individual, someone who couldn't reconcile the man he presented to the world with the man he truly was. The affair wasn't just about lust or temptation, it was a desperate search for something he couldn't find in his own life. Perhaps the preacher's betrayal wasn't just about the affair, it was about a deep internal conflict, a conflict that he couldn't overcome. As a father, this betrayal carries even more weight. What kind of example does he set for his child, and what kind of legacy does he leave behind? How will this impact his child, once they learn the truth? Will they see their father as a man who betrayed his family, or will they struggle with reconciling the preacher they thought they knew with the man who chose to risk everything? It's a question that no one, not even the preacher, could have fully understood at the time. The pain, the psychological weight, the consequences, this story is more than just about one man's betrayal. It's about the human heart, the fragility of trust, and the cost of secrets. It's about the devastating impact one person's actions can have on the lives of those who depend on them the most. In the end, how much of himself did the preacher lose in the process? And how much of the life he had built was truly worth the risk he took? As we come to the end of this story, the most shocking elements of this case stand out. A preacher, once highly respected in his community, was living a life of deception. A man trusted by so many to lead with honor and integrity, yet he carried a dark secret, an affair with a convicted felon, a betrayal so deep that it threatened not just his marriage, but his wife's health, and the life of their unborn child. This wasn't a simple lapse in judgment, it was a reckless, dangerous choice that forever altered the lives of everyone involved. The wife, already facing the emotional toll of betrayal, now had to cope with the terrifying possibility of HIV disease that could put her own life and the life of her child at risk. The real mystery in this story isn't just about the affair or the disease, it's about the preacher himself. Why would someone who had built a life of trust and faith, who was seen as a leader and a father, engage in such reckless behavior? How could he allow the temptation of an affair to risk everything he had? What drove him to make such a catastrophic decision? Was it merely a moment of weakness, or did something deeper, something hidden within him, push him to betray everything he once stood for? We may never fully understand why he did what he did, but we do know one thing for sure, the consequences of his actions will haunt him forever. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into a truly twisted story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more true crime investigations like this one. We'll be bringing you more shocking stories from the world of betrayal, deceit, and the consequences that follow. In our next episode, we'll explore another chilling tale of betrayal, secrets, and revenge. You won't want to miss it. Do you think this preacher deserves redemption, or should he face harsher consequences for the devastation he caused? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The story may be over, but the conversation is just beginning.